What if the family you thought you lost found its way back to you in the most unexpected way? Wes Carter was just a small-town mechanic, weathered, kind, and quietly carrying the weight of a past he never got to finish. But when a sleek car breaks down outside his garage, and a little girl runs into his arms, calling him Daddy, his world cracks open. The woman beside her, a billionaire, her daughter, possibly his. And what unfolds next is a story of forgiveness, healing, and the kind of love that doesn't knock. It simply walks in when you least expect it. If you believe in second chances, in the quiet power of kindness, and in stories that leave your heart a little fuller than before, this one's for you. Make sure to subscribe so you never miss a chapter of The Girl Who Called Him Dad. Now, let's begin. The poor mechanic fixes single mom billionaire's car. Suddenly, her daughter runs to him and calls him Dad. The clatter of a wrench hitting concrete broke the silence in the old garage, echoing off walls lined with faded license plates and shelves, thick with dust. Wes Carter exhaled sharply and wiped his grease-stained hands on a rag. Outside, the late Texas afternoon simmered with the kind of heat that made the air dance above asphalt. He straightened his back, joints protesting the movement. Another oil change finished, another thankless job done for a regular who'd pay him next Tuesday, or maybe not at all. Wes didn't mind. Money had stopped being his North Star a long time ago. He moved toward the open bay door, squinting into the sun. Life in Harmony Springs, population just under 2,000, didn't offer much in the way of excitement. That was part of the charm, or maybe the curse. It was a town where nothing much changed, except the people you lost. 6 years. That's how long it had been since Elena disappeared from his life. One day she was there, rubbing her pregnant belly with a soft smile and humming Patsy Cline. And the next, she was gone. No note, no goodbye, just vanished. The grief hadn't come all at once. It crept in slow and bitter, lodging in the quiet hours between engine repairs and lonely dinners. The rattle of an engine snapped Wes back to the present. A sleek black Tesla was crawling up the gravel path toward the garage, awkward and out of place among the rusted pickups and aging Buicks that usually limped in. He arched a brow. Teslas didn't break down. Not often, and not out here. The car stopped short of the bay, its driver's side door swinging open with elegant urgency. A woman stepped out tall and poised, dressed in designer jeans and a white blouse too crisp for the dusty town. Her auburn hair was pinned neatly, and even from this distance, Wes could tell she didn't belong here. "Excuse me," she called, walking briskly toward him. "My car just stopped. No warning, no lights. Can you take a look?" Wes nodded, instinctively wiping his hands again. "Pop the hood. Let's have a peek." The woman hesitated, glancing at the back seat. "Maya, sweetheart, stay in the car. I'll be right here." From inside, a small voice answered, muffled, "Okay, Mommy." The hood clicked open and Wes leaned in. The engine was clean, too clean. Most problems with these were electrical, or software-based. He'd need more than elbow grease for this one. Still, he tapped a few lines, disconnected and reconnected the battery port. Buying time. "Not a lot of Teslas find their way to my place," he said, glancing over his shoulder. "We were on our way to Austin. I took a detour for gas and a bite to eat. Didn't realize we were this far off the highway." Her voice had an edge of embarrassment. Wes nodded without comment. Something in her eyes, not fear exactly, but unease, piqued his curiosity. She wasn't used to being out of control, and this situation had stripped her of the illusion. From behind, a car door creaked open. Tiny footsteps. Wes turned just in time to see a small girl, maybe 5, stepping out from the Tesla. She had curls the color of golden honey and wore a pink dress speckled with cartoon animals. Her eyes, wide and bright, locked onto Wes like a magnet. She sprinted toward him without warning, arms open wide. "Daddy!" The word struck like a lightning bolt. Vivian froze, mouth slightly open, horror etched across her features. Wes took a reflexive step back, confusion knotting his brow, but the little girl didn't slow down. She wrapped her arms around his grease-smeared jeans and looked up at him with a smile that could have melted metal. "Daddy," she repeated, softer this time, as if confirming what she already knew. Wes dropped to a crouch. "Hey there, sweetheart. I think you've got me confused with someone else." "No, you're him," she said simply, like stating the sky was blue. "I saw your picture." Vivian rushed over, gently pulling Maya away. "I'm so sorry. She's just tired. It's been a long day." Wes stood slowly, heart thudding in a rhythm that felt far too familiar. "It's all right," he said, voice steady but inwardly reeling. "Kids got imaginations. And good eyes." Vivian's face was pale, lips pressed tight. "Thank you for checking the car. Is it drivable?" "Not without a reset. I can get you running, but I'd rather run diagnostics to be sure. Might take an hour or so." She hesitated, then gave a tight nod. "Okay, is there somewhere we can wait?" Wes gestured toward a bench shaded by the overhang. "Not fancy, but there's cold water inside. You're welcome to sit a spell." As Vivian guided Maya to the bench, Wes returned to the car. His hands moved mechanically, but his mind was spinning. The girl had his eyes, same stormy grey-blue he saw every morning in the mirror. And the picture? What picture? He didn't believe in signs. Life had taught him that hope was just a setup for heartbreak. But something about this encounter felt like a crack in the world he'd carefully built around his grief. Maybe, just maybe, something was about to change. Vivian Hart kept her eyes on Maya as the little girl sat swinging her legs beside her on the splintered wooden bench. Every few seconds, Maya glanced back at the garage where Wes Carter worked beneath the Tesla's hood. Each glance carried a quiet anticipation, like she expected him to come over and scoop her into his arms. Vivian's hands trembled slightly in her lap. She folded them tighter to still the movement. That word, "Daddy," still echoed in her ears. "Loud, innocent and unforgiving, sweetheart," she said softly, brushing a strand of hair from Maya's cheek. "Why did you call that man your daddy?" Maya didn't look confused or embarrassed. Instead, she gave a little shrug, as if the answer were obvious. "Because he is." "No, baby, he's not. You've never met him before." Maya furrowed her brow, thoughtful. "But I remember him, Mommy, from my dream, and he smells like him." Vivian blinked. "Smells like who?" "Like Daddy," Maya whispered, and leaned into her mother's side. Vivian looked away, heart racing. She wasn't a woman who rattled easily. She'd run a Fortune 500 company through a crisis with steadier hands than most, but this was different. This was personal, messy, unpredictable. Wes Carter. She had known the name, of course. How could she forget? Elena had whispered it on her hospital bed, one of her final requests before cancer stole her voice completely. "Don't tell him, unless Maya needs him. Please, Viv." He wasn't ready then, but maybe someday. Vivian had made a promise, and she had kept it. Until today, inside the garage, Wes worked in silence, though his mind was anything but quiet. He wasn't sure which made less sense, the fact that a billionaire woman just happened to break down in front of his garage, or that her 5-year-old daughter had called him daddy with a certainty that shook him to his core. She had his eyes. That wasn't imagination, and when she'd wrapped her arms around his leg, something had shifted in him, something ancient, paternal, aching. He wasn't ready to say it out loud, not even to himself, but the suspicion rooted itself deep. As he finished the diagnostics, Wes leaned against the car and rubbed his face with both hands. He couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't a coincidence. He walked out to where the mother and daughter sat. Maya immediately perked up. "Hi again," she chirped. Wes smiled a little crookedly. "Hey there." Vivian stood, smoothing her blouse. Well, what's the verdict? You had a software glitch. Happens sometimes with these newer models. I reset it manually, but I'd still recommend getting it checked once you're back in Austin. Vivian nodded politely, but her eyes were searching his. Thank you. That was very kind of you. Wes hesitated. Then, lowering his voice, he said, Listen, I don't mean to pry, but earlier, when Maya called me that, I'm sorry, Vivian cut in quickly. She's imaginative, sensitive, and she just lost her aunt not long ago. Maybe she's trying to fill a space. Wes blinked. Her aunt? Vivian paused, realizing the trap she'd walked into. Yes, my younger sister, Eleanor, Wes said quietly, watching her reaction. The name landed like a stone between them. Vivian looked away first. You knew? I loved her, Wes said simply, and then she left, without telling me anything. I didn't even know she had a sister. Vivian nodded, face pale. She didn't talk much about her family, did she? No, she said she didn't have anyone. She said, the same about you. The silence between them was taut, heavy with 6 years of unsaid things. I need to ask you something, Wes said, his voice rough. Is Maya... Vivian stepped forward, lowering her voice. Wes, this isn't the place or time. Not in front of her. Please. He looked down at Maya, who was humming to herself and trying to catch a butterfly with her tiny hands. I just want to know the truth, he said. I know, Vivian replied, her voice softening, but the truth is complicated. Can we talk later, away from all this? Wes hesitated, then nodded. I close up around 6. I'll be back at 7. Vivian reached for Maya's hand. Do you have a picture of Elena? He asked. Suddenly, Vivian opened her purse and handed him a small, worn photo. It showed Elena holding a newborn baby in a hospital bed, her smile radiant but tired. Her eyes locked on the infant, with a love that burned right through the glossy surface of the print. Wes swallowed hard. She looks like her. Vivian said nothing, just took Maya's hand and led her back to the car. As they drove away, Maya waved enthusiastically through the window. Wes raised a hand in return, but his heart was a whirlwind. Inside the garage, the silence returned. But it wasn't peaceful this time. Something had shifted. Something real. And as much as Wes had trained himself not to hope, not to wake for things lost, a flicker had returned. It was small, but it burned. The sun had just dipped below the horizon when Wes Carter locked up the garage for the night. The evening breeze brought a hint of relief from the day's heat, rustling the wind chimes that hung from the edge of the roof. Tin scraps shaped into stars and crescent moons, gifts from children whose parents couldn't afford repairs but offered what they could. He stood for a long moment at the doorway, hand resting on the deadbolt, heart beating with a rhythm that didn't feel like his own. Vivian was coming back, and she had answers, but he wasn't ready, or maybe he was, in the way people are never really ready for the truth, but know when it's time to face it anyway. Wes walked to the back of the garage where his modest living quarters stood, a converted storeroom with a bed, a tiny kitchen, and shelves cluttered with more memory than utility. He didn't turn on the light right away. He liked the way twilight made everything soft, less real. In the corner sat a wooden crate, worn and splintered, covered with an old army blanket. He hadn't opened it in years, not since she left. He knelt beside it and slowly lifted the lid. Inside were the ghosts he kept hidden, photos of Elena, a pair of her sunglasses she'd left behind, a faded concert ticket from the night they first kissed, and one small envelope with a hospital's return address. He'd found it in the mailbox 3 months after she disappeared, but never opened it. It came from a hospital in Austin, and he'd assumed the worst. But by then, he was too angry, too broken, to care. He ran a thumb along the edge of the envelope. Tonight, The weight of not knowing felt heavier than the weight of any truth. He slit it open. The letter was brief, handwritten in Elena's sloping script, faint from age but unmistakably hers. Dear Wes, if you're reading this, it means I found the courage to send it. I don't know if you'll want to read it. I wouldn't blame you if you didn't. But I owe you the truth. I'm sick, Wes. It's cancer and it's spreading fast. They say I may not have much time, and I'm pregnant. The baby is yours, a little girl. I've decided to name her Maya. I didn't leave because I stopped loving you. I left because I didn't want you to be tied to a dying woman and a baby you didn't ask for. I knew you weren't ready and I was scared. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I robbed you of the chance to be something more. If you ever meet her, tell her I loved her. Tell her you did, too, even if you never got the chance. I love. You always did, always will, Elena. Wes stared at the letter until the words blurred. The room was quiet, save for the hum of the old fridge and the aching throb of his heartbeat. She hadn't run away to punish him. She hadn't stopped loving him. She'd been protecting him, in her own way, and Maya, his daughter. The truth settled into him like a slow-burning coal. She was real. She was here. And she had looked up at him, wide-eyed and trusting, and called him Daddy like it was the most natural thing in the world. He wiped at his eyes with the back of his hand, then read the letter again. By the time the knock came at the door, Wes had read it 3 times. He opened it to find Vivian standing there, dressed in a simple navy sweater and jeans. Her expression was guarded, but her eyes, Elena's eyes, held a flicker of something between guilt and resolve. I wasn't sure you'd be here, she said. I wasn't sure I'd answer, he replied. Vivian nodded once. May I come? In? Wes stepped aside. She entered quietly, looking around the space with the silent appraisal of someone trying not to invade. He handed her the letter without a word. She read it quickly, lips pressed tight, hands trembling slightly. I never knew she wrote you, Vivian said softly. I thought she never did. She did, Wes said, but I wasn't ready to read it until now. Vivian sat at the edge of a chair, the weight of everything between them thick in the air. She loved you, she said, more than anything, even when she knew she was dying. I know, Wes replied, voice low. I just didn't know why she didn't give me a choice. She thought she was sparing you. And I went along with it. I told myself I was honoring her wish. But maybe I was just afraid too. There was no accusation in his voice, only tired acceptance. I would have wanted to know. I needed to know. I realize that now, Vivian said. She looked up, her voice breaking just slightly. She's yours, Wes, Maya. There's no denying it. You saw her. You felt it. I did. And she felt it too. A silence fell between them. Not uncomfortable, but thick with the gravity of what now lay before them. What now? Wes asked. Vivian hesitated. She's already lost one parent. I don't want to confuse her, but I want her to know who you are, slowly, gently. I don't want to rush anything, Wes said, but I want to be part of her life. I think I need to be. Vivian gave a shaky smile. She's already drawn you into it, Wes. The moment she saw you, she knew. Wes sat down, the weight of the day sinking into his bones. He looked across the small room at this woman, Eleanor's sister, Maya's guardian, the keeper of the truth, and felt something shift. Not just grief, not just guilt, possibility, hope. Vivian returned the letter to Wes with quiet reverence, smoothing its creased edges before handing it back like it was something sacred. She wrote it at the hospital, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. 3 days before Maya was born, she made me promise I'd keep it safe, just in case. Wes nodded slowly. The paper felt warm in his hands, like it had finally found its rightful place. I should have been there, he murmured, half to himself. I should have been holding her hand when she left. I should have been holding Maya when she opened her eyes. Vivian didn't respond right away. The silence stretched. Gentle, not awkward. It was the kind of stillness that happens when two people are facing a moment too big for quick words. She died quietly, Vivian said finally. Peacefully. She asked for you. Wes looked away, jaw tightening. Then why didn't you tell me? Vivian took a breath. Because I didn't believe in you. There it was, simple, honest. It didn't come with malice, only regret. I thought you'd disappear, she continued. I thought you'd break Maya's heart before she had a chance to understand what it meant to have one. I would have done anything for her, Wes said. Maybe, but you didn't even open the letter. That stung, not because she was wrong, but because she wasn't. I was angry, he admitted. I thought she left me because she didn't want me, because I wasn't enough. Vivian's voice softened. She left because she loved you. Elena always made terrible decisions when she thought she was protecting someone. A faint smile touched Wes's lips. She always did. They sat in silence again, two people piecing together a life neither of them fully understood, held together now by a child who knew nothing of broken promises or second chances. All she knew was a feeling. She said she saw my picture. Wes said, Maya, that day in the garage. Vivian nodded. There's a photo in Maya's room. It was Elena's favorite. You were holding hands by the lake, laughing. Maya asked who you were, and I told her you were someone her mommy loved very much. Wes closed his eyes briefly. He remembered the photo. He remembered that day. Sunlight on the water. Elena's laughter echoing between trees. That moment had felt eternal, and in some strange way maybe it was. I didn't expect her to recognize you, Vivian said. But when she did, I couldn't stop her. I don't want to confuse her, Wes said, echoing her words from earlier. I don't want to come crashing into her world like a storm she didn't ask for. Vivian met his gaze. She's already in the middle of that storm. The difference is, maybe you're the calm in it. The thought rooted itself in his chest. He had nothing to offer, no polished home, no savings account, no perfect plan. But he had arms that knew how to hold a voice that could soothe, a heart that had been aching for a reason to love again. I'd like to see her, he said quietly. Vivian studied him for a long beat. Then she stood. Come by tomorrow afternoon. We'll be at the cottage near the lake. She loves the water. She says it makes her feel close to her mom. Wes stood too. I'll bring something. Maybe a kite. Kids still fly kites? Vivian smiled. Maya does. She walked to the door but paused before leaving. Wes? Yeah? She has your eyes. But she has Elena's courage. He watched her go, the door swinging closed behind her with a final click that felt like the start of something new. The next day arrived with sunshine and birdsong. Wes hadn't slept much, but he didn't feel tired. He'd found an old red gate in his garage, faded but intact, and cleaned it up like it was a priceless artifact. He drove to the lake, hands tight on the wheel, stomach a twist of nerves. He wasn't sure how to show up in a little girl's life without wrecking it, but then again, maybe the trying was what mattered most. Vivian greeted him at the path's edge, her expression unreadable. She's down by the dock, she said. I told her someone special was coming. Did you tell her who I am? Vivian shook her head. I figured I'd leave that part to you. Wes nodded and made his way toward the water. The lake shimmered in the late afternoon light, and there, sitting cross-legged on the dock with a toy boat in her lap, was Maya. She looked up, and when she saw him, her face lit up with the kind of joy that couldn't be faked. You came, she shouted, standing and running to meet him. Wes dropped to one knee, arms open. She ran straight into them like she had the first time. You brought a kite? She asked, spotting it over his shoulder. Yeah, Wes said, his voice thick. Thought you might like it. I love it, she said, already taking his hand. Can we fly it now? He glanced back at Vivian, who gave a small, encouraging nod. Yeah, sweetheart, he said. Let's fly it. And they did, laughing, stumbling over roots and wind gusts, watching the kite rise higher than it should have been able to with such old fabric and frayed string, but somehow it held, just like he hoped he could. Wes hadn't expected the kite to last more than 10 minutes, but somehow it soared, like it had waited years to stretch its wings. Or maybe, like him, it had just been waiting for the right hands to hold the string. Maya ran in wide, sweeping circles, her laughter filling the open air, a sound so pure it stirred something deep in him, a long-forgotten instinct. Wes followed her, letting her tug him along the shore as the kite danced above them like it belonged to another world. Vivian sat on a blanket nearby, watching with quiet amusement. She had removed her shoes and tucked her legs beneath her, a book open but unread in her lap. Every so often, her gaze drifted from the pages to the two figures in the field, and something in her softened, like the closing of an old wound that had never quite healed right. After nearly an hour, Maya flopped onto the grass, breathless and grinning. This was the best day, she declared, arms spread wide like angel wings. Wes sat beside her, wiping sweat from his brow. Better than a day at the toy store. Way better. She turned her head, eyes squinting up at him. Can we do this every weekend? Wes hesitated, the weight of the question heavier than it seemed. He looked over at Vivian, who gave the slightest nod. I'd like that, he said, if your mum's okay with it. She is, Maya answered with confidence. I asked. Her already? Vivian chuckled from her spot beneath a tree. She did, twice. Maya sat up suddenly. Can we go look at the ducks? Wes glanced toward the lake, where a pair of mallards paddled in the reeds. Sure thing. Want to hold my hand? She reached for it without hesitation. They wandered down the dock together, slow and unhurried. Maya skipped every few steps, talking about the names she'd given the ducks last week and how she thought one of them might be having babies soon. Wes let her chatter wash over him like sunlight, natural, unfiltered, and healing. There was a rhythm to her voice that felt like home, even though he had never known what that word truly meant until now. As they watched the ducks glide past, Maya leaned against him. You feel like a daddy, she said, very seriously. Wes looked down at her. How does a daddy feel? Warm, she said without pause. Safe, like you're not going anywhere. He swallowed hard. I'm not, he said quietly. When they returned to the picnic blanket, Vivian had packed up most of their things. She stood, brushing grass from her jeans, and gave him a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She had a good time, she said, more than good. So did I. Vivian glanced at Maya, who was now making a crown out of dandelions. She's never opened up to anyone this quickly. She's usually shy, careful. She doesn't seem shy, Wes said with a grin. Only with people she doesn't feel safe with, Vivian replied. Her voice caught slightly, like the words surprised even her. There was a pause, the kind that hovered just long enough to suggest something else beneath it. I don't want to overstep, Wes began, rubbing the back of his neck, but if you're comfortable with it, I'd like to keep seeing her, maybe help out here and there, not just today, something steady. Vivian studied him. What does that look like for you? I don't know, he admitted. I've never been a dad, but I've changed enough. Spark plugs to know how to show up. I figure that's a good place to start. She smiled, this time more genuinely. It's a very good place. They watched Maya for a moment longer. The late afternoon sun was turning golden, painting everything. In warm, forgiving light. She needs roots, Vivian said quietly. Something that doesn't shift under her feet. And to be honest, so do I. Wes turned toward her. You're not alone, Vivian. She nodded, blinking back something she didn't want to name. Neither are you. In the weeks that followed, Wes became a fixture in their lives, like a porch light that had always been there but had only now been turned on. He showed up every Saturday without fail, sometimes midweek too, always with something small in hand. A wooden puzzle he made in the garage, a jar of wildflower honey from a local farmer, a children's book with dog-eared pages. Maya began to ask for him by name, not Daddy this time, just Wes, but she said it like it belonged to her. Vivian watched it all unfold with a cautious heart. She didn't rush it, didn't define it, but she let it breathe. And in the quiet spaces between story time and lake walks, something new began to grow, not just in Maya's world, but in hers too. It was during one of those quiet evenings, after Maya had fallen asleep on the porch swing, that Vivian offered Wes a cup of tea and stayed outside with him. They didn't say much, just sipped slowly as the stars blinked awake. "You're good with her," Vivian said eventually. "I'm trying to be. She trusts you." "I don't know if I've earned that yet. You're earning it every day." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was the kind of silence that meant something was coming, but it didn't have to be rushed. "You ever think," Vivian asked softly, "that maybe all the things we thought were endings were really just interruptions?" Wes looked out across the dark water. "If that's true," he said, "then maybe this, us, might be the part where things start to make sense." She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Vivian Hart stood at the kitchen sink, staring out the window into the dusky quiet of their backyard. Fireflies blinked lazily near the garden beds, and wind chimes clinked like distant memories. On the porch, Wes sat beside Maya on the swing, his voice low as he read from one of her bedtime books. Vivian couldn't hear the words, but she didn't need to. She knew the rhythm, knew the way Wes's voice softened when Maya leaned her head against his shoulder, the way his thumb always rubbed gently across the book's spine as he read. She knew those things now, too well. She was grateful for him, deeply. But that wasn't the whole truth, because somewhere between the lake days and Saturday breakfasts, between small favors and unsaid feelings, she had started to want him, and that terrified her. Vivian dried her hands and moved to the doorway just in time to hear Maya's quiet giggle. Wes looked up and met her eyes across the porch. He smiled, simple, genuine, like there was nothing complicated between them. She smiled back, but the guilt twisted behind her ribs like a knot. Later that night, after Maya had fallen asleep with her dandelion crown still in her hair, Vivian stepped out onto the porch with 2 mugs of tea. Wes was still there, sitting on the steps like he was afraid to leave. She handed him one of the mugs. "Chamomile," she said. "Thanks," he murmured, taking it in both hands. She went out fast. "She always does after you visit," Vivian said, sitting beside him. "You wear her out in the best way." They sipped in silence, the stars overhead flickering through the wide-open Texas sky. After a while, Vivian spoke. "Do you ever think about her, Elena?" Wes didn't hesitate. "All the time." "I do too," Vivian admitted. "More now than I have in years. It's like you brought her back into the room." Wes looked at her gently. "I don't want to take her place, Vivian. Not in your life, not in Maya's." "You couldn't," she said. "That's the problem. You're not a replacement, Wes. You're something else, something I wasn't prepared for." Her voice cracked slightly at the edge and she looked away. "I feel like I'm betraying her," she whispered. Wes set down his tea. "By letting someone in." "By letting you in," she said, meeting his gaze. "By feeling something I'm not sure I should feel." Wes exhaled slowly, the words hitting him with quiet gravity. "Vivian, I never asked you to feel anything for me. I didn't come here for that. I know. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel something too. Something real. And I don't think it dishonors her. I think maybe it honors what she left behind." Vivian looked down at her hands, her fingers tightening around the mug. "I've been everything to Maya," she said. "Mother, aunt, guardian. I've held it together because I had to. I didn't think I had room for anything else. And now," he asked gently. Now there's you, and it's scary. He nodded. It's scary for me, too. I'm afraid of what Maya might think, what she might feel if we... She's already feeling it, Wes interrupted softly. She doesn't need words to know when something's good. Vivian turned her face toward him, the porch light casting shadows across her cheekbones. You talk like a man who's known love. I knew it once, he said, and I lost it, but that doesn't mean I don't still believe in it. They sat in silence again, the kind that didn't demand resolution, just presence. Wes leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Do you think she'd hate us for this, Elena? Vivian hesitated. No, she said at last. I think if she saw Maya with you, if she saw how gently you love her, how naturally, she'd forgive us before we even asked. A breeze rustled the trees, lifting a curl of hair from Vivian's temple. Without thinking, Wes reached out and tucked it behind her ear. Their eyes met and held. He didn't kiss her, not yet. He just stayed there in the space between maybe and not yet, knowing this moment mattered more than any leap. I'm not asking you for anything, Vivian, he said. I'm just here, and I'll keep being here, however you need. She let out a long, trembling breath. That might be the bravest thing anyone's ever said to me. I've had a lot of practice being brave, he said with a faint smile. Didn't always know that's what it was, but it turns out showing up is a kind of courage. Vivian reached for his hand. She didn't say anything more. She didn't have to. Later that night, as Wes walked back toward his truck, he looked up at the stars scattered across the Texas sky. They seemed closer somehow, like he could touch them if he stretched high enough. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. He didn't know what title he held in Vivian's life or what role he would play in Maya's future, but he knew this. He had shown up, and sometimes that was how healing began, not in grand declarations or perfect timing, but in the quiet decision to stay, even when it would be easier to run. Vivian had always been measured with invitations. Her childhood had taught her that open doors sometimes let in storms. But on Saturday morning, as the sun warmed the kitchen windows and Maya danced barefoot to an old country song, she found herself dialing a number she now knew by heart. Wes answered on the second ring. "Morning," he said, his voice low and gravelly, like coffee before the cream. "Hey," she said, hesitant at first. "Maya and I were thinking of going up the ridge today. The wildflowers are in bloom. I thought maybe, if you're not busy—" Wes didn't wait for her to finish. "I'm not." She could hear the smile in his voice. "We'll bring sandwiches," she said, and hung up before her nerves caught up to her mouth. By midday, the three of them were climbing the gentle trail that curved around the lake and opened onto the ridge. The sky was impossibly blue, with only a few soft clouds drifting by like lazy thoughts. Wes carried the picnic basket and a folded quilt under one arm, Maya skipping just ahead of him, collecting dandelions like buried treasure. Vivian followed, at a slower pace, watching them. Her daughter and the man who had quietly, unexpectedly, begun to fill the aching spaces she'd long thought permanent. "Wait for us, mountain goat," Wes called, as Maya scampered up a small slope. She turned and grinned, her arms full of flowers. "I'm fast because I'm little." "Can't argue with that logic," Wes said, panting slightly as he caught up. Vivian reached the top a moment later and paused, breath catching, not from the climb, but from the view. Before them stretched a wide meadow brushed with wildflowers. Bluebonnets, Indian paintbrushes, and buttercups swaying in unison beneath the breeze. "It looked like something out of a dream." "It's even better than last year," she murmured. "You come here often?" Wes asked. "Every spring. Elena and I used to sneak up here as girls. She called it our secret place. After she passed, I brought Maya. It became ours." Wes unfolded the quilt and spread it under a tall pecan tree. "Mind if I borrow it for the afternoon?" Vivian hesitated, then smiled. "I'd be honored." They ate sandwiches with too much mustard and sweet tea poured into mismatched travel mugs. Maya made a crown of buttercups and insisted Wes wear it. He did, without protest, though his ears turned pink. Vivian laughed, really laughed, and it startled her how good it felt. Not cautious, not forced, just joy, plain and true. After lunch, Maya pulled them both up by the hands. "Let's play statue freeze." "What's that?" Wes asked, feigning confusion. Vivian shook her head. "Oh, you're in for it now." The game involved spinning. Music hummed off-key by Maya, and sudden exaggerated poses when she yelled, "Freeze!" Vivian stuck mid-squat, Wes with arms overhead like a startled scarecrow. They played until their sides hurt from laughing, until Maya collapsed on the quilt in a heap of giggles. When she finally dozed off, curled beneath a patch of shade, with a flower still tucked in her hair, Wes and Vivian sat in the quiet that followed. The breeze shifted, carrying birdsong from the trees and the faint hum of bees. "She loves you," Vivian said suddenly. Wes looked down at Maya, his features soft. "I love her too." Vivian's throat tightened. "She talks about you in her sleep, calls out for you sometimes." "You're already a part of her, Wes." He didn't respond right away. Instead, he looked out over the field, eyes distant but steady. "I've spent most of my life fixing things," he said. "Engines, carburetors, brakes, but this is different. I don't know how to fix a life, Vivian. I don't even know where to start." "You already started," she said. "You showed up. You listened. You let her see your heart. That's more than most fathers give." He turned toward her. "And what about you? What do you need?" The question caught her off guard. For so long, her needs had been secondary. First, to Elena, then to Maya, then to the fortress she built around them both. "I don't know," she admitted, "but for the first time in years, I think I want to find out." They sat in that truth together, neither rushing to fill the space with anything other than presence. Wes leaned back on his elbows. "You know," he said, eyes on the sky, "I used to think love was this big sweeping thing, fireworks and grand gestures. But maybe it's smaller than that. Maybe it's a quiet afternoon on a hill, with mustard on your shirt and flowers in your hair." Vivian smiled. "Maybe it's just being seen." Wes turned to her. "I see you, Vivian, not just as her mother or her sister's keeper. I see you." And there it was again, that space between maybe and not yet. But this time, it felt a little smaller. Vivian reached over and took his hand. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The wind rustled the wildflowers, and above them, the sky stretched wide and endless, like a future they hadn't dared hope for until now. The storm came in fast, unannounced, like Texas weather often did, blowing in from the west with a wall of angry gray that swallowed the sun in a matter of minutes. Wes barely had time to shutter the garage windows before the sky cracked open. Rain lashed sideways, hammering the tin roof like a freight train. Thunder shook the walls, and somewhere in the distance a power line popped, sending sparks into the night. He watched it all from the doorway, heart heavy. Earlier that day, Vivian had offered him something unexpected, not just kind words or time with Maya. She'd offered to invest in rebuilding the garage. "I've been thinking," she'd said, her voice tentative. "You could expand, add a lift, maybe even hire someone part-time. I could help, just to get you started." Wes had nodded, lips pressed tight, but something in him had recoiled. Help from her. He wasn't sure what bruised him more, her generosity or the fact that he needed it. Now, standing in the dark as the wind peeled off a strip of the garage's roof, Wes felt the weight of it, all pressing down. The insulation flapped like torn sails, tools clattered from shelves, a lifetime of patchwork stability, unraveling in real time. He stepped inside, lit the old lantern, and sat on a stool beneath a leaking beam. Rainwater pooled near his boots, and the smell of oil and pine cleaner filled the air like a memory. He should have said thank you. Instead, he'd said something that had shut her down cold. "I'm not one of your charity projects, Vivian." It hadn't come out the way he meant. But that didn't matter now. Vivian paced the living room, arms crossed tightly against her chest, listening to the storm batter the windows. Maya was asleep upstairs, blissfully unaware, but Vivian couldn't shake the echo of Wes's voice. Not angry, just guarded. She understood pride, understood the years he'd spent standing on his own, head down, hands calloused from surviving. But still, she hadn't expected the wall he'd thrown up so fast. It hurt more than she wanted to admit, not because he'd rejected the offer, but because he'd misunderstood the heart behind it. She hadn't seen him as weak. She saw him as family. Vivian sat down, pressing her fingers to her temples. Maybe she had moved too fast. Maybe they were all just pretending they could outrun their grief and build something new out of borrowed time. The phone rang. She answered before the second ring. "Wes?" There was silence for a beat. Then his voice, quiet, gravelly, and broken around the edges. "The roof's gone." Her breath caught. "Are you okay?" "Yeah," he said. "Garage took the worst of it. Lost some tools, some parts. Nothing I can't replace." But something in his voice said otherwise. "I'll come over," she began. "No." The word was firm, final. Vivian froze. "Why not?" "I need some time," he said. "Just some space to figure out what the hell I'm doing." Her voice softened. "Wes, this doesn't change anything. You don't have to go through this alone. I've always gone through it alone." "Well, maybe that's the part that needs changing." Silence again. She could almost hear him shaking his head on the other end. "I'm no good at being someone's future, Vivian," he said. "I thought I could be, but maybe I'm just a guy with a broken roof and too much pride." Vivian's throat tightened. "You're more than that, Wes. You're so much more. I'll call you when I get the roof patched," he said, and then the line went dead. Wes didn't sleep that night. He tried. Laid down on the cot in the back room with the rain still dripping through a crack in the ceiling. But his thoughts spun like fan blades, loud and relentless. He thought about Elena and what she would say if she saw him now. He thought about Maya and how she'd started to call the garage Daddy's place when she talked to her stuffed animals. He thought about Vivian, her voice trembling as she tried to help him hold his world together, and how he'd pushed her away instead. What scared him wasn't the damage. It was how much he cared, how much he needed them, and Wes Carter had never needed anyone. At least not since the day he'd watched the world walk away from him one piece at a time. But now he had something to lose, and that made it real. The next morning, the sun returned like it always did, indifferent to what the night had taken. Wes stood in the wreckage of the garage, eyes squinting against the brightness. Neighbors stopped by with coffee and offers of help. He thanked them all, but turned each one down. He wasn't ready. Not yet. By mid-morning, he found himself standing in the middle of the shop, staring at a small framed photo that had somehow survived the chaos. It was the one Vivian had given him, Elena holding baby Maya. He picked it up carefully, brushing off flecks of insulation. "She believed in me," he whispered. "So did Vivian, so did Maya." The question wasn't whether he deserved them. The question was, could he learn to believe in himself? Vivian parked at the edge of Wes's lot just after noon. The storm had passed 2 days ago, but the damage still lingered. Jagged shards of roofing in the grass, water stains on the siding, and the gaping wound in the garage roof like a story. Paused mid-sentence. She stepped out of her car with a Tupperware dish in one hand and Maya's art project in the other. The sun was high, casting long shadows over the gravel path, and the hum of cicadas buzzed like a warning, or a dare. Vivian didn't knock. She found him behind the garage, bent over a sawhorse with a hammer in hand. His shirt clung to his back with sweat, and there was sawdust in his hair. "Hey," she said softly. Wes looked up, startled. His guard was slower now, wearier, like someone who'd been standing alone in the rain too long. "Viv," he said. His voice held no bite, just exhaustion. She offered a small smile and held out the container. "Peach cobbler," Maya insisted. "Said it makes everything better." Wes took it wordlessly and set it down on the workbench. Vivian leaned against the post beside him, watching as he lined up a board and drove a nail with sharp, steady strikes. "Looks like you're making progress." "Trying." She hesitated. "You didn't return my call yesterday." I didn't know what to say. That you're okay would have been a start. Wes set down the hammer, wiping his brow with the back of his wrist. "I'm sorry." Vivian studied him. "That's not what I came for." He met her gaze, wary. "Then why are you here?" "To tell you something I should have said sooner." She stepped forward, crossing the short distance between them. "I didn't offer to help you because I think you're weak, Wes, or broken. I offered because I believe in you, and because helping someone doesn't mean they're helpless." Wes let the words settle before replying. "I've spent so long doing it all myself," he said. "I don't know how to let anyone in without feeling like I'm giving something up." Vivian softened. "Maybe you're not giving something up. Maybe you're gaining something." Wes looked away. "I wasn't trying to hurt you. When you offered to help rebuild, something in me panicked, like it made me smaller." "It doesn't," she said. "Not to me." He glanced toward the garage. "I've lived so long with things half held together, duct tape and willpower. That kind of life doesn't leave much room for pride." Vivian took a breath. "You don't have to prove anything, Wes. Not to me, not to Maya. She deserves better than a man with a leaky roof and no savings. She deserves someone who shows up." Vivian's voice broke slightly. "And so do you." He blinked, caught by that. "I don't need a man who has it all figured out," she said. "I need someone who's willing to figure it out with me. That's what family is." The word, family, hung in the air. Not heavy, but hopeful. Wes ran a hand through his hair. "When you say things like that, I start to believe it." "Then say them back," she said, stepping closer. "Say what you really want, not what you think you're allowed to want." Wes took a long breath. His eyes locked on hers. "I want you," he said. "I want her. I want a life that doesn't begin and end with loneliness." Vivian exhaled, tears forming despite her best efforts. "Good," she whispered, "because Maya made this for you." She handed him the drawing, Maya's careful crayon work showing 3 stick figures under a house with crooked shingles. One was clearly Wes, with his messy hair and long arms. The others were labeled Mommy and Me, and above it all, a single word in blocky, shaky letters: home. Wes stared at the drawing, his fingers trembling. "She said," Vivian murmured, "that she finally knows where her home is. It's not a place, it's a feeling, and she said she only feels that way when you're around." He pressed the picture to his chest. "I don't know if I deserve that," he said hoarsely. "Maybe not," Vivian said gently, "but you've earned it." For a while, they stood there without speaking, the sounds of birds and distant wind, filling in the spaces where doubt used to live. Then Wes nodded toward the garage. "I want to build something better than what I had. Not just the roof, the whole damn life." Vivian smiled, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I'm in," she said, "whatever that looks like." They didn't kiss. Not yet. Instead, Wes reached for her hand, rough fingers folding over hers with a kind of reverence. And in that gesture there was more promise than any words could hold. Later that evening, Wes stood in the middle of the garage, the setting sun casting long golden streaks across the battered floor. He looked at the beams above, the tools around him, the broken parts waiting to be made whole. He was still scared, but for the first time in a long time, he wasn't afraid of hope. He was building something, and this time it wasn't alone. The newly rebuilt garage smelled of fresh paint and sawdust, with just a hint of motor oil beneath it all, like the past hadn't been erased, just cleaned up and given a second chance. A small crowd had gathered under the shade of the oak tree that arched over the lot. Neighbors, friends, and curious townsfolk lingered in folding chairs with cups of lemonade and paper plates of cookies. A hand-painted sign read, "Carter's Garage and Learning Center, Grand Reopening," the brushstrokes wobbly but proud. Wes stood near the bay doors, adjusting the collar of his only button-up shirt. He'd shaved that morning. Really shaved. Not just a quick scrape of the jaw, and even combed his hair, which Maya had declared made him look almost famous. Vivian stood beside him, wearing a sunflower yellow dress that made her look like the season itself. Maya clung to her hand. A piece of paper crumpled in the other. "Are you sure about this?" Vivian whispered, glancing down at her daughter. "She insisted," Wes murmured, heart already thumping. Vivian smiled. "She gets that from Elena." I was afraid of that. A light laugh passed between them just as Mayor Grady stepped up. To the front with a wireless mic borrowed from the church down the road. "Folks," he began, "we don't often get brand new beginnings in this town. Most of us are working with second chances, sometimes third. That's what makes this day special." There were scattered claps, a few cheers. Grady turned toward Wes. "This place has been a staple in Harmony Springs for a long time. But today, it becomes something more. A garage, yes, but also a place for young folks to learn a trade, find a skill, or maybe just find someone who believes in them." Wes swallowed hard, and none of it would be happening without the heart and hands of the man we're celebrating today. Grady paused. "Wes, why don't you say a few words?" Wes looked out over the crowd, suddenly hyper-aware of every sweat bead on his back, but then he felt a small hand slip into his. "Maya, I think she should go first," Wes said. Grady handed the mic down with a smile, and Maya stepped forward. Her pink sneakers scuffed the concrete as she cleared her throat. "My name is Maya," she said, voice small but steady. "I want to talk about my daddy." Wes froze. The air seemed to still. "Sometimes," she continued, "your daddy doesn't come when you're born. Sometimes he comes later, like a surprise you didn't know you were waiting for." A hush fell over the crowd. "My daddy teaches me how to fix things," she said. "But not just cars. He fixes days. He fixes sad feelings. He even fixed my mommy's smile." Vivian covered her mouth with one hand. Maya looked over at Wes. "He doesn't always know he's being brave, but he is. And I love him." There was a pause, long and beautiful. "I just wanted everyone to know." She handed the mic back to the mayor, then walked straight to Wes and wrapped her arms around his legs, holding tight. The clapping began slowly, then built into something whole, a rhythm of hands that spoke louder than any words. Wes knelt to hug Maya, burying his face in her shoulder, blinking fast. "Thank you, sweetheart," he whispered. "That was the bravest speech I've ever heard. I learned from the best," she whispered back. Later, after the crowd had thinned and the lemonade table had been cleared, Wes stood in the middle of the garage, watching the light pour in through the new windows. Vivian leaned in the doorway, arms crossed, her eyes soft with something that felt a lot like peace. "You okay?" she asked. "I'm better than okay." She stepped toward him, closing the space. "She meant every word," Vivian said. "Even the parts that made me cry." Wes smiled, still amazed. "I didn't expect that, not from a 5-year-old. "She's not just 5, Vivian said. "She's 5 with a soul that's been through more than most people twice her age. But she's healing. We all are." Wes looked around the space, bright, sturdy, full of potential. "This place feels different." "It should," Vivian said. "It's not just a garage anymore." He turned to her. "You're the reason." "I didn't walk away," she shook her head. "No, Wes, you're the reason you stayed." A quiet moment stretched between them. Then, without pretense or pressure, Wes reached out and took her hand. "What now?" he asked. Vivian smiled, her eyes bright with quiet certainty. "Now we live," she said. "And we love. And we keep showing up. That's all any of us can do." He nodded slowly. "I can do that." They stood together as the afternoon light turned golden, Maya chasing butterflies in the lot, her laughter floating like music into the corners of their new beginning. And for the first time in his life, Wes Carter felt like he was exactly where he belonged. The drive out to the old cemetery was quiet. Maya sat in the back seat, hugging a bouquet of freshly picked wildflowers, blue bonnets and Indian paintbrushes, her tiny hands careful not to crush the stems. Vivian sat beside Wes, one hand resting gently on his knee, the other holding a folded letter. It was Elena's letter, the same one Wes had once left unread in a box beneath years of silence. Now it felt like a map, leading them not just to this place, but to each other. The road wound gently through low Texas hills, where golden light filtered through oak trees and birds skimmed the grass like they were drawing lines in the wind. When they arrived, Maya was the first out of the car. "This way," she said, already running toward the familiar spot near the edge of the field, where a pecan tree arched over a weathered headstone. Vivian and Wes followed more slowly, their steps quiet, reverent. Elena's name was carved into the granite in simple script. No flourish, no gold leaf engraving, just her name, her dates, and a single line beneath. She loved deeply. She lived freely. Maya knelt beside the grave and arranged the flowers carefully. "She likes wild ones," she said. "Not the kind from the store." "She always did," Vivian replied, her voice thick with memory. Wes stood back, unsure at first, how to approach. For a moment, he felt like a trespasser, a man arriving too late to the story he should have been part of from the start. But Maya turned and took his hand, pulling him gently forward. "It's okay," she said, like she could read his thoughts. "She knows you now." Vivian unfolded the letter and offered it to him. "Would you like to read it?" Wes took it. With both hands, nodding, he cleared his throat, voice low. "Elena, I missed so many things I didn't know I was missing. The sound of your laugh in the morning, the way your eyes lit up when you talked about the baby, the life we could have. But today I brought her to you. Our girl, she's everything you hoped she'd be. Brave, curious, kind, and somehow more forgiving than I could ever deserve. She's teaching me how to love again, how to be a father, slowly, clumsily, but honestly. And Vivian, your sister has carried more than you could ever imagine. She held us both when we didn't even know we needed holding. I'm learning to live again, Elena, and I promise I will protect what you left behind with everything I've got." He folded the paper with careful fingers and tucked it under a small rock by the headstone. The wind picked up slightly, lifting Maya's curls as she looked up at Wes. "Can we say goodbye now?" she asked. "Yes, sweetheart," Wes said, crouching beside her. "But not a sad goodbye. Just the kind that means we'll carry her with us." Maya nodded solemnly and pressed her hand against the stone. "Goodbye, Mommy," she whispered. "Thank you for finding Daddy for me." Vivian wiped her eyes. Wes reached for her hand and held it tightly. They stood there for a long while, letting the quiet wrap around them like a blessing. Eventually, they began the walk back to the car. The sun dipped low behind the hills, casting everything in golden light. Maya skipped ahead, chasing butterflies and humming a tune of her own invention. Vivian looked over at Wes. "Do you think she really feels her?" "I think kids know things we forget," Wes said. "She feels what matters." Vivian exhaled deeply. "You know, I didn't think I'd get here." "Where's that?" he asked. "To peace. To this." He nodded slowly. "I didn't either." They watched Maya twirl in the tall grass, her laughter filling the space like wind chimes in spring. And in that moment, there was no grief, no regret, just love, bright and alive and right in front of them. Weeks later, the garage was bustling, not just with repairs, but with possibility. Teens from the high school came by after class to learn the basics of car maintenance. Wes taught them the way he wished someone had taught him, patiently, with stories and metaphors, always ending with, "It's not just about fixing what's broken. It's about understanding how it works." Vivian helped organize the schedule and community outreach, her business savvy blending seamlessly with Wes's hands-on wisdom. Together, they were building something that mattered. Maya had her own toolbox, pink of course, and wore coveralls 2 sizes too big. She didn't fix much, but she handled tools like a pro and kept everyone in line. Sometimes she'd call out across the lot, "Daddy, you need a wrench?" And every time, Wes would pause, just for a second, and let the words settle in his heart like the sweetest kind of music. On a Saturday evening, they returned to the ridge, the same hill with the wildflowers and the old pecan tree. Wes spread out a quilt, Vivian poured lemonade into mason jars, and Maya chased fireflies in the tall grass. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in soft peach and lavender, Maya curled between them, her head on Wes's chest. "We're a family, right?" she asked sleepily. Wes kissed the top of her head. "The best kind, the kind that finds each other," Vivian added, her voice full of quiet joy. And under the Texas sky, with stars blinking awake one by one, they sat together in the soft hush of evening, no longer defined by what they'd lost, but by what they'd found. "Now that you've reached the end of The Girl Who Called Him Dad, I'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from? And what part of the story touched your heart the most? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If this story moved you and you'd like more stories filled with hope, healing, and the quiet magic of kindness, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. There's so much more to come, and I'd love for you to be part of this growing community. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today. Whether this is your first story or one of many, your presence means more than you know. Until next time, take care of yourself, and never stop believing in second chances.